Hello, my name is Helena Momoko Powis. I am a student from TU Delft, and I'm here to present a bachelor thesis project representing 10 students that completed this back in 2021. So the name of the mission is Kumo, which is Japanese for cloud, and the purpose of our mission was to basically understand the atmosphere of Venus. So to begin, because this is a student project, I wanted to just explain briefly why we came across this topic, why we were doing this project, and how it was organized. Then I wanted to briefly touch upon why we chose Venus and explain the mission timeline, and then finally what exactly we designed. So the project itself is a design synthesis exercise, which is the TU Delft's equivalent of a bachelor thesis project. It was completed by 10 students. 3 of us are present here today. It was done over a period of 10 weeks, about 2 years ago, from the time of April till June 2021. On top of this, we were supervised by a professor, Dr. Erwin Moy, and also 2 PhD students, as well as a client. In our case, was a member of ESA. So the explanation of why we chose to go to Venus was an article similar to this that came out in September 2020. So there was a conversation about possible detections of biomarkers in the atmosphere. However, this was not confirmed, or it was not something that could be confirmed. Therefore, we thought it would be a good motivation, and we were tasked with this mission. So we separated this into scientific objectives as well as our own limitations. So we wanted to look exactly at the abundance of noble gases in the atmosphere. We also wanted to look at UV absorbers, and then finally looking at the locations of where these biomarkers came from. We also limited this to the accuracy that we wanted. This accuracy was taken to be able to prove the existence of things such as phosphine or methane. We also then limited it to 55 and 65 kilometers. And as the gentleman before me mentioned, this is because of the temperature and pressures, which are very similar to that on Earth. And we thought that was an achievable range for us to design over a period of 10 weeks. Just to give you a bit of perspective, that's around 10 students working 40 hours a week over 10 weeks. That's around 2.35 FTEs. So a little bit about the mission itself. Of course, given the very limited time we had, there were a lot of components that we pulled off the shelf. So this included our launch phases, our kick stage, as well as how we entered the atmosphere. So we opted for a Falcon 9 as our launch vehicle, entering into a parking orbit, which will then move to Venus via a Hohmann transfer of 146 days. This will then arrive to Venus. It will go into a circular orbit around Venus, enter the atmosphere, and then deploy at around 60 kilometers. Our probe, we opted for something inflatable, but I will get into the details of that in a moment. So the mission design ourselves, we tried to aim for a 10-orbit period. So that's around 30 to 60 days, we assumed. We decided to have a 4.5 revolutions within our range from 55 to 65 kilometers. And also considered what would happen during the night, how to conserve energy, as well as also our end-of-life procedures. So this was then separated into 3 phases. Our first phase was our scientific operations. Tori, which is our atmospheric probe, would use its instruments from 4.5 revolutions and continuously communicate with our orbiter. Our orbiter's name is Tsubuyaki. At this point, the orbiter would not be carrying out any measurements, but would continuously be taking data from our probe. The second half of our scientific operations would then be our probe descending back to 55 kilometers, back to the original equator, and then repeating the measurements at 5 specific points. We were hoping that while completing the first phase, we will have areas of interest, and so the 5 main points are our interested areas that we wanted to communicate. At this point, Tsubayaki, our orbiter, will then enter an elliptical orbit so that it can continuously, it can take information from our probe and communicate that to ground station back on Earth. Finally, of course, we understand how harsh Venus's environment is, so we don't know if it will be able to survive, probably not the 10 revolutions that we hope for. So we also considered end-of-life operations. So as it descends to the surface, it will continuously take data and send it back to our orbiter. At this point, Tsubayaki, our orbiter, will begin its own scientific operations and continue that until it stops working. So the design itself, as I mentioned, there were a lot of elements that were off the shelf. We focused a lot on the atmospheric probe and the orbiter itself instead of more the entry vehicles or the launch phases. So the way that we analyzed this was first having our requirement analysis, understanding our limitations, going on for conceptual designs and a trade-off, and then finally into a detailed design. The trade-off itself, we thought about airships, balloons, more traditional concepts, things that have already been done before, as well as also a fixed wing, just a normal aeroplane. But there were also designs such as a dynastat, which is the middle ground between an inflatable airship and a fixed wing. And we also decided to be a little bit creative, so we also thought about a jellyfish concept. Our trade-off consisted of these 5 categories, which were weighted based on how important we thought they were for our mission. As you can see, risk and reliability and performance were our biggest factors, given the harsh environment of Venus. And also, the dynastat was our winning concept, so we continued with that idea. When looking at the detailed design, we separated the 10 students into 5 separate categories. So we had power and propulsion, the structures, the payload itself to carry out the measurements, the performance, as well as the telecommunications. On top of this, we also thought about the sustainability of our mission, the risk analysis, and also performed a cost analysis. So finally, going on to the detailed design of our probe. There are a lot of factors that I haven't put on this slide, given the short period of time that I have to talk to you, but I just wanted to highlight a few things. So our probe is what you can see on the right of the screen. It is an inflatable body, apart from the center, which is a rigid structure. That's where all our instruments will be placed. It is powered by 4 3-blade propellers and has a antenna on top to communicate with our orbiter. It also contains all the payloads that we thought were necessary to meet our scientific requirements. This was more of a creative concept, and given that I was talking about the cost analysis, you can also see what we predicted our probe to be, roughly. So our orbiter itself was a little bit of a more conventional design. There was nothing much that we could do to make it more creative. However, pointing out the main points, it does have its own set of payloads, so the visual monitoring camera and the imager. And it also has a low-gain antenna, which communicates with our probe, and then the high-gain antenna, which then communicates back to Earth. So that was the conclusion of my report. Thank you very much for listening.